Hello everybody. And today I was working on some of my tanks, clearing out moss, and I wanted to see, this is my new 20-gallon red shrimp tank. And the whole goal of this tank is to create the very best red shrimp line that I can possibly do with the shrimp I have. So I'm going to take the shrimp I have and make them absolutely as good as I possibly can. And so I was taking shots today, and I thought I'd come up with how to explain my new plan on these 20-gallon longs, and this tank in particular, on how to cull shrimp and my new approach to culling shrimp, at least in these 20s. So I started this tank right at about 4 months ago, and I put about 40 shrimp in there. They weren't the best red shrimp, but I made sure I didn't get bad red shrimp. I put them in here, and the plan is to let them breed out for 5 or 6 months, and we're at the 4-month mark. I figure at that time you're starting to get second generations. You're getting babies that have grown up and having babies, and you got all the babies your original adults had turning into adults. And so that's why I set it at 5 or 6 months. And mind you, we're on month 4 at this point in this tank. So normally when people are talking about culling shrimp, they're talking about pulling out the bad ones, letting them all breed out, and pulling out the bad ones. You have a certain threshold that you set, and if the shrimp grade falls below that threshold, you pull them out, and that works. But when you stop and think about it, all you're really doing is maintaining what you have. So the question is, what do I need to do cull wise to make my shrimp as good as possible, to make them even better than what they are, and to keep making them better and better and better till you have show quality, the best shrimp you can possibly come up with. And I think throughout my 5 years, I mean, I know there's a lot of guys who've been doing this way longer than I have, and they're like, duh. But the best way to do that is start the tank over. Pull out, well, first of all, you need to select only the very best. Catch them out of the tank before you even get started is my recommendation. I've learned that through trial and error. But the shrimp that really make you go wow when compared to all the others, and that's what I'm trying to do here, is get good shots of the shrimp that make me go wow. And these will end up being the future of the colony. Now there's still lots and lots of really young shrimp in here that have not matured to the point of being full grown adults, and that you could say wow, because with neos, especially these reds, they get better and better the older they get. So that's why I'm letting them grow up to be a certain age to get at least be full grown adults. There's tons and tons of babies in here. This tank had been completely enveloped in moss in 4 months. So, and I was doing some orders today, and someone got some moss, and I really hooked them up because I wanted to clear some moss out of this tank and get a good look at what I'm dealing with here. So by going this route of culling, you're only keeping the absolute best. And then all the other shrimp are going to be going into another tank, a cull tank. My plan is, with these 20 longs that I have just recently set up, to make those the absolute top-notch, best graded shrimp that I have of those lines. They're in these tanks. Now, you may be saying, well, you got a 75-gallon tank. Why don't you do it in there? Well, when you get a big tank, if you start getting over 20 gallons, it's really hard to control, to make sure you're getting all the shrimp and to deal with them. And so the smaller tank is much easier to deal with quality shrimp. And if you're talking about mass producing shrimp, then you're better off in a bigger tank. So I found that in these 20-gallon tanks, I usually end up with about 400 shrimp after about 6 months, depending upon how much I start out with. So if you start off with only like 10 or 15, it's going to take a lot longer. And in this tank, I started off with about 40, maybe 50. So these guys got going real fast. Lots of good adults to get the colony started. At least for me, and the way I keep my shrimp tanks, it seems that once you start getting to that 400 shrimp mark, that they start slowing down. And then that, if you're trying to produce a bunch of the best shrimp, that means it's a good time to thin the herd and reduce numbers, because when you get numbers so high, then there's more competition for resources, for the food, and the breeding slows down. But when you first start a new tank, if everything's good and everything's happy, they're going to explode. Get out all the snails, get out everything else in there besides the shrimp, so that every bit of food you throw in that tank, the shrimp can have it all to themselves and not have to share. And pretty much in most of these tanks, pretty much every single female you find is buried or just recently dropped little baby shrimplets. So when you reach that number, it depends on the size tank you have, and my experience, I've had enough of these tanks to know by now, so we're getting close to having the peak amount of shrimp. I mean, they'll still keep breeding and they'll still keep making more, but the growth is like a slope, I guess you could call it, and the more shrimp you have, the slower it's going to grow, if that makes any sense. So that's why with these 20-gallon tanks, I can tell that we're getting there. I want to let some of these babies grow up so that I can tell I can have a better certainty of what shrimps are going to be the very best. And out of my 20 longs I've set up to go this route with, this is the one I set up first, and this is the one I put the most shrimp in. So this one is really booming now. These are pretty good shrimp. This is definitely my best shrimp colony, and these are getting pretty close already to approaching fire reds. Now there are plenty of fire red. Most of these shrimp are fire red quality, but there's still some that aren't. But I want to go past fire red. I'm trying to make painted fire reds the best homebred fire reds that I can possibly make. Eventually, after doing this for a couple years, restarting it every 6 months, I have done it, but eventually you're going to end up with better and better and better shrimp. Now this summer I did it with a Blue Dream tank, and I pulled out all the shrimp and kept only the very, very best. This was the first time I tried it in a 20-gallon tank with the Blue Dreams, and it turned out really good. And then I had all these tanks that were just not being productive, and I thought, I'm going to do this with all these 20-gallon tanks. Now the Blue Dreams tank, it had its first 6 months run, and now a second, it's probably a couple months away from being gone through again. But the just going through one cycle on the Blue Dreams, and Blue Dreams is a lot more unpredictable than these fire reds. Not a lot more, but there's more fluidity, I guess you could call it, to the quality of the Blue Dreams. These guys are consistent, pretty good, but then you have the ones that stand out, the outliers. And normally with a colony, you're taking out the bad outliers and leaving everyone else. Well, this method, you're taking out the very best outliers, because those are what you want to keep. Those are what you want the future of your line to be. So then you take out the best outliers instead of the worst outliers. You take out the best outliers, put them aside, collect all the other shrimp, put them in another tank. You have a Skittles tank or a Cull tank, or in my case, I'm going to have a mid-grade tank and a high-grade tank and a low-grade tank for reds. So I'm going to be sorting these into 3 different piles eventually. And eventually I want to do that with all my lines if I ever get enough tanks. So I'm hoping what I'm saying in this makes sense. You want the very, very best shrimp possible if you're a shrimp breeder. Now, if you're just a casual hobbyist and shrimp keeper, then taking out just the bad ones, that's good enough. If you're happy with what you received and you just want to maintain that, then that's good. And no matter how good a shrimp you have, after so many generations, you're going to have to cull, or the quality will go down. At least this is for Neocaridina and even Caridina to a certain extent now. It's a whole different ball game with Caridina, but all I keep at this time are Neocaridina, and so that's what I'm talking about here. Now this way is a whole lot more work, and I mean, really, if you go this route, you're looking to make the best shrimp that you can, and probably doing it to sell them. So, and everyone needs to be able to have quality good shrimp, and if more people are doing this, I think it'll work out better. I'm still a ways away. This is still the first cycle with these reds, so I'm excited to see what the future holds with this way of doing it. And I still have the big tanks where I selectively call out the bad ones, but this will be the future of how I keep my shrimp. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.